Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, and this week I see a lot of my peers talking about Pacific Rim. And honestly, it's a verse that's kaiju based and extremely underlooked in terms of attack potency and feats, with a mass majority of discussions revolving around the IP being neither fodder. With this reputation, I decided not to put Godzilla in the verse because unless you use trash, like 90% of Godzillas get multi-continental as a baseline for all their stats. Plus I figured that it would be a little weird because the main dynamic of Pacific Rim is kaiju versus mechs, not kaiju versus kaiju. So I figured that I would put the Evangelion in the verse to see how they would do. I think this topic is a lot more interesting because on a narrative level, both IPs are basically the same. Humanity is suddenly attacked by kaiju, and with the realization that nukes are too costly, they come together to make giant mechs to protect humanity. Both mechs are also piloted by humans through neural links, with the performance of the mechs varying drastically depending on the mental health of the users, with even major news outlets at the time claiming Pacific Rim was just Evangelion for Americans, which to be fair is a term that's thrown around pretty loosely these days.
How about that prick's face when he saw the gat?
But to director Guillermo del Toro's credit, he's admitted that he's never seen the show, and that he came up with all the concepts all by himself. But he did also admit he was very familiar with the designs of the mechs and angels. So I guess this is just an instance of great minds think alike. But anyways, the feats and scaling for a series like Evangelion is a lot more tame than Godzilla, so I figured this matchup is a lot less spite. And unlike just adding Godzilla in the verse, there's actually a conversation that we can have. So let's see how Shinji, Asuka, and Rei would do in canceling the apocalypse. But first, if you like the power scaling content, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. We post weekly videos and we cover a wide variety of topics. From Godzilla to Five Nights at Freddy's, this is the channel you want to be at. Be sure to follow all my socials, and with all that garbage out the way, let's get into today's matchup. Okay, one last thing before I start talking about stuff, and I just want to say that it's going to be a little different today, because usually I'll divide the video in two sections, and then I'll come in the end of the video to make a conclusion based on what I came up with. But Pacific Rim makes it a little bit easier for us today, because the IP goes out of its way to divide the kaijus into 5 separate categories, with each subsequent layer being stronger than the last. So I'll cover categories 1 to 2 right now, and then I'll compare the Evangelions to them, and it will be kind of a gauntlet thing going on. So let's get right into category 1s. Alright, and the only notable category 1 kaiju is the first beast to ever appear in the Pacific Rim verse, being Trespasser. This guy's the weakest kaiju in the entire verse, but still, he has some notable stuff, so let's address that. There's also some higher ends that I want to talk about, but I don't think they're really that valid. We'll get to those later. But overall, I put category 1 kaiju around sea level to possibly mountain level in terms of power. For starters, Trespasser was stated to be the epicenter of a 7.1 magnitude earthquake, and thanks to a calculation I found in the verse compendium, we can assert the yield of energy to be equivalent to around 673 kilotons of TNT, which is large town level. And we can get some calculations for his casual durability, as he came from the drift, which is located in the Challenger's Deep, one of the deepest places on the planet Earth's ocean. This might not sound too impressive on paper, so let me quote an article I found on the depths of ocean and the pressure that it entails. If you're at sea level, each square inch of your surface is subjected to around 14.6 pounds. The pressure increases about 1 atmosphere for every 10 meters of water depth, and at a depth of 5,000 meters, the pressure will be approximately 500 atmospheres, or 500 times greater than the pressure at sea level. So what does that mean? Well, basically the deeper you are, the heavier you are. And it also means the pressure of the ocean itself gets heavier, and you're fighting against that due to your size. Keep in mind we're talking about a kaiju as well, so the amount of pressure that he's fending off just by walking to the surface is very, very crazy. And due to a calculation I found in the versus compendium, we can say that category 1 kaiju can no-so pressure equivalent to around 27,391.72 tons of TNT, or 27.392 kilotons, which is town level. I want to say there's island level calcs for both of the previously mentioned feats. One is for the total seismic energy of the 7.1 earthquake, and one is a calculation for all the altitude stuff. But I'm not sure bro scales to the total seismic energy of his earthquake. Like, I can't really assert that he can harness that full power. And if you want to talk about his potential island level durability via the altitude calc, you'd have to ignore something that's really big about this kaiju, and well, he gets killed by 3 nuclear missiles. For context, a modern ballistic missile may carry warheads up to 20 or more megatons of TNT, but since bro took 3 of them, that's around 60 megatons, which would put him at around sea level. And I said possibly mountain level because you could try to stretch the or more part to argue these 3 missiles were equivalent to around 100 or more megatons all put together, but I don't know. Moving on to Category 2 Kaiju, and they don't really have anything that I could find individually, but they would just upscale Category 1s. So whereas the last tier was around City Plus to possibly Mountain Level, we could grant that as a baseline for these guys right here. Noble Kaiju in this group include Onibaba and Ragnarok, and that's it. And I don't want to waste you guys' time, so I'm gonna make this quick. And well, the Evangelions don't even need to be brought out against these guys, as even as early as episode 1, it's shown that humanity has bombs on deck equivalent to around 1.92 gigatons of TNT, which is large mountain level. So whereas these kaijus are debatably around mountain level, human man-made bombs in Evangelion, such as N2 mines, get into mountain level over 10 to almost 20 times over. So yeah, looks like our 3 Eva pilots get the day off for this one. Maybe they'll have a beach episode, or go to therapy. But unfortunately for our pilots, their break will be short-lived as Category 3s and 4s start to show up. Alright, so in lore, Category 1 to 2s are pretty fodder. As explained in the prologue of the movie, Jaegers used to neg them so bad that the kaiju threat as a whole became part of pop culture, and it wasn't something really taken seriously after a while. So that's why I haven't been talking about the Jaegers as a whole, because the lower kaiju, such as Category 1s and 2s, barely scale to the Jaegers if at all. And with casual Jaeger blows being equivalent to nuclear bombs, it makes the city mountain tier that I got for them pretty consistent actually. But with Category 3s to 4s, we find ourselves dealing with new animals, as these type of kaiju can push the average Jaeger to the extreme. And I want to say that the average Jaeger would be pushed to extreme because you have absolute G's like Striker Eureka clowning on Category 4 kaiju, so yeah. But speaking of Striker, he has a self-destruction attack that he uses at the end of the first film, with the blast calculated to be around city level. But if you consider the nuke more than likely vaporized a portion of the water, the yield of energy would drastically increase. Remember how deep in the ocean they are at this point of the film. And if you think this self-destruction attack vaporized as little as 5 to 10%, the yield for this bomb gets all the way to country level, with it varying from country to large country depending on the amount of water you think was vaporized. I think this is a good time to point out that all the calculations used in this video will be in the description, as you can find them in my new Discord server. It's not a power scaling Discord, it's more just a chill Discord. Obviously you can talk about general things and just chill and have a good time and talk to me. But if you're on this channel, you're more or less interested on the power scaling aspect, so I've gone out of my way to make dedicated channels to power scaling stuff, and I have threads and docs and scans and calcs. So yeah, if you want to be there, it's chill. And there's also some people in the channel that you might recognize, so yeah, if you want to say hi and help contribute to a bigger community, be sure to join the link in my description. But anyways, moving on to more important things. Yeah, the bomb would get all the way from country to large country depending on how much water you think was vaporized. Now unfortunately, I can't really scale this to any Category 3 to 4 because the one Category 4 kaiju that was around the bomb was completely obliterated by it. But it's important to note that Gypsy Danger, while not at the epicenter, was still close to it and able to endure a small portion of the yield of energy due to his proximity to the bomb, with the amount of force that he endured being equivalent to around 6 to even 30 gigatons depending on the vaporization of the water. And that's some island level scaling that he gets. Keep in mind, kaiju in this category can box with Jaegers such as Gypsy Danger, and it's safe to say they would scale anywhere from at least mountain level to more than likely just island level. Notable kaiju in this category include Knifehead, Yamaroshi, Multivore, Letterback, Otochi, Raiju, and Scunner. Quite the list of combatants, I must say, but how would our Ava pilots handle these guys? And I think it goes without saying that you'd need all 3 of them. But seeing as how we're putting the Evangelions in the same situations from the movie, we can say that Knifehead, Yamaroshi, and Multivore come out independently by themselves, with Itachi and Letterback being the only duo. I'll talk about Raiju and Scunner later because they come out with Slattern, so let's just focus on the ones that I mentioned. All 3 Evangelion pilots should be relative to each other, so we can talk about one of their feats and scale the other 2 to that one. And during the events of End of Evangelion, Asuka is able to rip apart and critically damage the mass reduction Evangelions, with her ultimately losing only due to them utilizing the Lance of Longinus, as well as Asuka running out of power herself. These same mass reduction Evangelions would also go on to contribute to a massive explosion during the excavation of the Dark Moon, creating a crater so massive that it's visible from space, with their individual output being calculated to be equivalent to anywhere as low as 32.79 to as high as 196.01 gigatons of TNT, which is anywhere from island level to even large island level. All the Evangelions should scale to this, but I want to point out that the pilots would have to be peak mental performance in order to perform this feat or scale to this level of power. Which, I mean, I think that's the situation that you guys would expect this video to be in. You know, when you ask who would win a fight, you don't think of like a weaker version of the character. But yeah, If all 3 of our Evangelion pilots found themselves in the perfect headspace, they would be able to dispatch this wave of Kaiju pretty easily. They'd have no trouble with the Category 3s as well as the 1-4, with the one duo consisting of Litterback and Otachi causing them a little trouble, but overall I'd say nah, they'd win. So overall with mid difficulty, I'd say our Evangelion pilots move on. But now we get into the final wave of fights from the Pacific Rim, being Operation Pitfall, consisting of the 2 Category 4s as well as Slattern, and the final fight against the Mega Kaiju. But we'll talk about the Evangelion's performance a little bit later, as first we're gonna have to talk about how powerful Category 5s are. And luckily for me, Category 5s are actually the easiest Kaiju to scale, and that's because there's only 2 of them. But basically, you remember that country to large country level self-destruction attack? Well, Slattern literally survived it point blank. Though I want to point out he was left in a state where he was able to be killed by Gypsy Danger, but the fact he was able to walk away from a bomb that powerful and survive is quite the feat indeed. But we can use inverse implications to upscale the yield of this self-destruction attack to higher levels of power. In Pacific Rim the Black, Hunter Vertigo has cryo cannons that can reach absolute zero. Yeah, like Kiryu, with the yield of this energy being equivalent to around 992.771 teratons, which is continental. I'm not saying this power scales to any base Jaeger, but I mean it's fair to say that their self-destructions should scale to this level of power. And there's actually some stuff in the first Pacific Rim novel to make their self-destruction attacks being continental consistent, as Gypsy Danger's self-destruction was able to destroy the Antverse, at least on the surface level, because this self-destruction attack was made to stop an alien invasion by bombing their home planet, with the implication being that you'd have to destroy their surface in order to stop an invasion 100%, which would be a feat around multi-continental, like pretty deep into the pentatons if I recall, meaning that Slattern survived a multi-continental attack to the face and was able to survive. And then you have the Mega Kaiju who would just upscale him, so we get pretty deep into multi-continental. And to no one's surprise, this would prove itself to be the Evangelion's biggest challenge. I think the Category 4s would be pretty easy, but Slattern himself would cause an issue. But thankfully, like I said, the Evangelions have higher metas, and that's because the Evangelions we see in the show are derived from Adam, a gigantic angel of light that just by waking up started the second impact, creating an explosion equivalent to around 18 billion megatons of TNT, or roughly 18 pentatons, which is multi-continental. The Evangelions themselves should scale to this explosion, as they're literally clones of Adam being derived of the flesh that survived the second impact. So if you give the Evangelions this AP, it would be enough to deal with Slattern and the Mega Kaiju, but if you think the Jaeger's self-destruction is a surface wipe, then the Evangelions AP would be a joke. Because if you think the Jaeger's self-destruction was a surface wipe, and then you have Slattern who survives the explosion, it would be around like 600 plus pentatons. So even giving the Evangelions this attack potency, they would get ripped apart. But it's not over for the Evangelions because Rei comes in clutch, as usual, because she has a feat that involves her throwing the lance along Gina so hard that it disperses a massive amount of clouds. And when calculated, it's been determined that this feat gets all the way into the exotons, very close to even moon level, but very, very deep into multi-continental nonetheless. Way deeper into multi-continental than even a surface bust. Now, I'd argue that this scales to Rei as she literally threw it, but I know people who try to say that this is like an MCU Thanos and Infinity Gauntlet situation, a weaker user utilizing a strong weapon. But I don't agree with this because Rei is literally shown aiming, fixing her feet, and putting all of her force into the throw. So to say Rei doesn't scale to her own throw is a little goofy in my opinion. But if you really think it's just the weapon itself, Asuka during the end of Evangelion is able to stop the weapon mid-momentum, as well as survive it hitting her right in the face, though it critically injured her. So at the very least, it's safe to say that Evangelion's at peak synchronization would be around multi-continental plus, and would scale to Rei throwing the lance along Janus. So that's 2 ways to get the Evangelions into the exotons in base, way above even the Mega Kaiju. Also, I want to point out that no one's getting blitzed in this situation. I failed to talk about speed earlier because even Category 1s and 5s would all be relative in terms of speed, being around hypersonic to relativistic, with higher tier Category Kaiju being able to fight on par with the Pacific Rim Uprising guys, who can dodge particle/light-based attacks. Our Evangelion pilots would be around relativistic as well, because as previously mentioned, Asuka was able to react to the lance along Janus, which traveled from the moon to the Earth in 7 seconds, a feat requiring Asuka to have relativistic reaction time. Rei in the manga also has a really nice feat where she's able to intercept Ramel's particle beam despite being almost 400 meters away from its target. Oh, and Shinji also has a relativistic plus feat in the manga, so yeah, all the Evangelions and Kaiju will be around at least equal in the speed category, but it doesn't matter because the Evas are just simply much stronger at their peak synchronization level. But yeah, I'm gonna note once again, I'm taking the characters at their peak of power and base, because obviously Rei, Shinji, Asuka all have their bad days where they can't even move the Evangelion in question. But I mean, I think that you guys all assume that's what I'm doing anyway, anyways by clicking this video. While the Evangelions themselves happen to be a set attack potency and durability, the performance and utilization of said Evangelions varies drastically depending on the pilot's mental performance. Like there's examples in the show where Asuka and Shinji are bickering and they lose to angels that are only city level, but this is just due to lower / unfocused synchronization and should not be used to downplay the characters at their peak. So yeah, in conclusion, I'd say on a good day would have mid to high difficulty in canceling the apocalypse, but hey, theoretically they should be able to get it done. But hey, I didn't even take into account their awakened forms, as I don't think I have to tell anyone that's a really spite matchup. But if you're interested in how powerful something like Awakened Unit 1 is, for example, I recommend you check this video out right here. I'd also like to thank Zeno on the gram once again, because he scaled Pacific Rim before and he was a major help to this video. And I'd also like to thank all you guys, because your support really helps the channel grow. And hey, if you're new here, I post weekly videos and shorts and polls, and yeah, I think subscribing is a pretty good deal. But anyways, I'll see you guys next week, but until then, stay big, G fans.